Imagine you move from a place where you lived all your life. Imagine you move and you leave all your children and wife. Starting all over again, but no one you know is around. Well, they didn't have to imagine. They built it up from the ground. How does it sound? Not easy cause it isn't. Could have phased them, but it didn't. But the raid bond, that's a winner. And they ran straight to the finish. You get to know them up close and personal. Wait, just give me a minute. Welcome to the front row. Can I get a drum roll? Intentional. We may be immigrants, but we are still intentional. We are dependable. It's just that set the bar, but still the best of all, we are intentional.
Thank you for joining the Intentional Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Yolanda Jack. Today's guest is Sania Dookie. Sania Dookie is a registered social worker, and she will be speaking to us today on the topic, Immigrants Parenting Successfully. Feel free to connect with the Intentional Immigrants podcast at www.intentionalimmigrants.com. The podcast is available on YouTube. It's available on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcast. Hi, Sania. Welcome to the Intentional Immigrants podcast. I am so happy that you're able to join me again.
Yes. Hello, Yolanda. Thanks for having me again. And I'm just sharing with the Intentional Immigrants community. I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys in one of my passion areas today. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So today we'll be discussing immigrants parenting their children successfully. This will be a two-part series, and we will hand over to Sania, who has expertise as a social worker, as a registered social worker. She has seen, I guess, from children with addiction, behavioral problems, and I'm sure you've come across some immigrants that got caught up in the system, for want of a better word. So tell us, how can we avoid that aspect of life where we come to a new place or we come to a new country, and because our culture, some things that are so accepted in our culture are definitely not accepted in this new culture, this new society that we are in. How can we avoid going to jail?
Yeah, I suppose I can just easily tell everybody here who is listening, go read up on the laws of where you are right now. Look at how they encourage, or how they encourage people to parent their children. I can easily do that. But you know what, at the end of the day, that won't help, because what we'll be doing there as parents is just modifying our behavior to fit a system. Mm-hmm. But we have the wrong mindset there, because it's not about what the system dictates. Mm-hmm. It's about what is best for our children and what we want to do for our children. And if we approach our parenting from that perspective, then we won't have to worry about what the system dictates or what that specific culture dictates, because I believe that's pretty much what we've been doing for so long. Is we get a lot of our parenting strategies, our outlook on parenting from culture, from tradition. We are looked down on when we try to do differently out of the norm, and so as a result, we're kind of peer pressured or parent pressured to fall into a certain box.
Okay.
Right. So that would be the first thing, go to really what the heart of parenting is, not just look up the system and see what they allow in their culture or not, because parenting has nothing to do with culture. I mean, that is an influence, but at the end of the day, when you're talking about connecting with a heart and influencing a heart, culture changes, we change, we go different places. So that wouldn't really matter anymore as it relates to who we're helping or influencing to develop. And we're talking about children and teens who we're hoping to nurture into a society, whichever society or culture they end up into. We're hoping to nurture them to be successful, loving, empathetic, and to not be traumatized, not be living with lifelong implications of trauma.
Okay. All right. So you're saying once we, just like when you're driving, if you stick within the speed limit, then even if the cop pull you over, you should still be good, because once your documents are in order and once you stick within the speed limit, then he would just be paying you a courtesy call.
Yeah, and another example could be, you know, sometimes I know in Jamaica when I grew up, when I was growing up there, I saw people in taxis, for example, they would hear the police is around the corner and then they would take their seatbelt and hold it at their side, hold it to their side. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to get into trouble with the police. But at the end of the day, what's the core issue here that we're looking at? We're looking at safety. So even if you hold the seatbelt, you don't get in trouble with the police. But at the end of the day, we're missing the point, which is to protect yourself if there should be an accident. So that's kind of the same mentality as it relates to parenting that we need to seek to adapt to.
All right. So tell us about this mindset change, because, you know, cultures are very different. So go into this mindset change and how we can change.
Yes. So the first thing we need to realize is that parenting is not about culture. I know it's very, it's involved in it, but at the end of the day, we're influencing, as I mentioned before, a heart. We're influencing a life. We're influencing a life. And at the end of the day, we need to think about that child, their well-being, and what is best for them. I think the biggest mindset shift that parents need to adapt to or start to look into is looking from a more of a behavioral modification of parenting to more a heart modification of parenting. And the reason I said that is a lot of our parenting approaches have been to just address behaviors or bad behavior. And a lot of times the approach we take towards it is more fear-based, shame-based, guilt-based, and threat-based, sometimes traumatic-based. And the child would respond, and sometimes they would, most times maybe, they would respond, and it works. That's it. It works, but only temporarily. Only temporarily. Because they are responding based off fear, and when they don't feel that fear, or they're feeling a sense of power or feeling more independence, then that's when parents kind of get into a little bit of a trouble, because the child doesn't feel that they're fearful anymore. They can speak out, and now we're left with, okay, how do I handle this child, or how do I support them? So I think the first mindset shift is really about heart change, influencing the child. And the second mindset shift that I believe parents need to take is just really how we look at discipline. So when it comes to discipline, we generally have, and I've asked this question before, I have asked parents, you know, what are the struggles you have as it relates to discipline? And a lot of parents would respond saying, oh, my struggle is that I yell too much, or my struggle is that I spank the child, but I don't want to. And really, it's right then and there, it tells me that it is a power struggle. It's a power struggle as it relates to discipline. But really, what discipline is, and I'm going to break that down for us right now. The true heart of discipline is to teach. The Latin word or root word for discipline is discipulus, which means to teach. And whoever you're teaching is a student of you, right? And that's the same word that the word disciple comes from as well.
Okay.
disciple. So your student is your disciple. And you probably hear people say, what discipline are you studying? Well, I'm studying behavioral sciences, right? So we speak about it for accounting or math or whatever. So we're speaking about it from the perspective of teaching, nurturing, and influencing towards a particular situation. However, over time, we have connected somehow discipline with how much control I have over my child, how well I'm able to curtail or to control their behavior, and how much punishment or how creative I can be in my punishment in order to ensure that they go a certain direction. Now, the definition of punishment is to inflict hurt. And that doesn't mix well when it comes to teaching and nurturing somebody or creating a disciple of. So what happens here is when we go from a fear-based perspective, if I should get a little bit scientific here, Yolanda, is we activate the emotional center of our child's brain. And for those who know a little bit about the brain, the emotional center does not do reasoning, rational thinking, problem solving. It doesn't do learning. What it really does, it helps you to know how you're feeling about a particular situation and activates your survival system. Okay.
So the flight and flee.
Yes. So it activates your fight
or flight,
or freeze system, right? So that's where we find our child either gets combative or defiant towards us, or they become avoidant, or they will shut down.
Okay.
And the interesting thing, Yolanda, is that when the emotional center is activated to that extent and the child is not feeling safe or it's not integrated, the part of their brain that we are trying to teach and appeal to and help them to nurture and process and make lifelong changes, that part of the brain gets hijacked.
Okay.
So even for, younger children too, there's a part in the brain, an area that helps the child to process hearing properly. That area is affected as well. When they are emotionally activated, they feel threatened, feel like they need to survive a situation. So people might say to me, but Sania, I love my child and I just want to do the best for my child. So they know when I discipline them, I'm just doing the right thing for them. But the brain, the body is designed in such a way where it is programmed to respond to things that makes it feel uncomfortable, and it's going to register that as I am not safe, therefore I need to go into survival mode. And once we go into survival mode, then that means the part that I need to think and rationalize and process and remember what you're saying and what you're trying to say, it's offline until the child feels safe and secure. So that's how we end up going into a vicious cycle of parenting out of fear and the child acting or reacting out of fear. And that's where we find lying starts to happen, because they're thinking, oh my gosh, I gotta save myself from this situation, so let me just lie about it. Or hiding behind the parent's back when they're doing something. This also causes lack of confidence. So not always second guessing themselves because the fear of getting in trouble and the repercussions that would come with that. So those are things that we want to think about when it comes to discipline. What is it that we really want to do with our children? And at the end of the day, do we want them to have a fear-based perspective towards behaving? And that's where we find adults. They act based on authority. They don't take initiative to say, hey, I'm doing this because I know it's right. But they do this at work because they don't want to get in trouble with their boss, right? They want to make sure that they do a good job because they don't want to get in trouble with their boss, which what we need to be training our children to do when they're adults is, I'm going to do the best job I possibly can give and do because this is the right thing to do. Right? So when we look at the long-term perspective of what we're doing too, it does have negative implications. And I'm just talking about the behavioral. I haven't even touched on the mental health implications that this can have on a child long-term and into adulthood.
Okay. Tell me about the 3 types of parents. The 3 parenting styles.
Yes. So the 3 parenting styles that we have all come to love, and we're still using those. They're more modern terminologies, but we have what we call the permissive parent. And so this is the era where, you know, for those parents who are listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to damage my child, so I'm going to make sure that I just not push too hard or not perturb them and all that stuff. That's the permissive parent.
That's the jellyfish.
If you
Yes, I like the jellyfish. Tell me about the jellyfish parents.
So this is where we're saying, you know what, it's purely emotional, right?
Yeah.
And emotional connection. I'm your friend, you're my best friend, I want to be your best friend, I want you to tell me everything, I want to be I don't want to get on your wrong side. Basically, I'll allow you to take initiative for how you should behave. Right? So it's pure, it's just emotional and not necessarily including boundaries, set boundaries and expectations for the child. We have the passive one, of course, which is very close to, and that's a 4th one, it's very close to neglect, where you don't really care. There's no emotion, there's no structure, you just allow the child to raise themselves.
Okay.
And you find that that's very common in abusive situation or parents who struggle with substance abuse and they're just not available, or severe mental health issues where we just don't have any space to nurture the child, so they just do their thing. So we find them in cases either, but so that's for passive, non-involved, no emotions, no structure. The permissive is when I'm your best friend, do your thing, and we're still good. The other one is, you know, authoritarian, and that is to the extreme where it's less emotions, less trying to connect with the perspective of the child, like how they feel about something, connecting with why they behave the way they did, and talking with them and trying to figure out how they feel about certain situations. So for authoritarian, we make the rule, I make it because I'm your parent, I'm the adult, you got to stick to it or else. So it's very rigid, and with little room for flexibility, if there is any. Okay.
So that's a rock solid. What is it called? Yeah. What is the other word for it other than authoritarian?
Actually, I don't remember the modern term for it. They have so many different terminology. What would you call it?
I think, was it the rock? I know on one side they said there's a jellyfish, and then there's the rock solid parent.
Probably. That sounds like it fits it.
Won't budge. You know, they won't
budge.
Won't budge, can't budge. It's my way or the highway.
Yes.
Get with it.
Yes. That's pretty much it. And there's so many other terms. We have lawnmower parent, helicopter parent, we have the bear, whale. Yeah. So anyways, so long and short of it is it's authoritarian style of parenting, and what that does, as we talked about before, it's very, very fear-based.
Fear-based.
And we're controlling the child. We're not connecting with their personhood, like who they are, because they are different. They are little personalities, just like we have our personality. They are little personalities, just the same, and they deserve the same regard as we we should receive as adults. So not because they're kids doesn't mean that we should disregard them or invalidate them. They're human beings. That's the point. So we need to treat them with that level of respect as well. And to the context of age, connect with them and listen to how they feel sometimes, and kind of look into ourselves to see if there's anything that we can adjust sometimes. And that's really where we start to work wonders. So that's more the authoritative style, where there is structure.
Too much
there
sometimes.
Are expectations. There are expectations, and you know, the parent expects the child to carry out these expectations, but they are done within reason and flexibility. Meaning the parent tries to cater to how this will influence the child in a positive way. So they may welcome feedback from the child as well, and be open to making compromises at time within reason, if this is something that nurtures both of them and works to help the child, and also negotiating and all that stuff. So negotiating and compromising are bad word in some parenting cultures, like I ain't negotiating with no child. You know, I've heard it. But it's not what it is. It's not allowing the child to get their way. It's about connecting with your child and teaching them, nurturing them, helping them to develop a level of independence, initiative, and their own sense of identity. So at the end of the day, when they're no longer in your care, they are less prone to peer pressure. And we find that these children, they're more mentally and emotionally regulated, and they're more effective at problem solving and independence.
Okay.
So that is kind of what we need to look at, you know, at the end of the day. What is it that I want for my child? I know this is uncomfortable for a lot of parents, because when we introduce talking to the child, seeing how they feel, compromising some areas, negotiating in some areas, we feel as if we're letting go of our control and power. Yeah. And parenting is not about control and power. It's not. If you feel like you're losing power and control, then that is time to do some introspection, because parenting is not about how well you can control your child or how much power you have over your child. We have missed the mark there. So that is a time when we want to do some introspection and do some internal work. Parenting is about influence, nurture, making a difference, and really helping our children to be the best possible person that they want to be. So that is going to go into our next section of our discussion, where we talk about how we can really maintain discipline, healthy discipline in our children, and influence them in the way that we want, that we believe or we have found to be more beneficial to them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sania. Thank you for presenting to us the first phase of our two-part program on immigrants parenting their children successfully. And I like the fact that you tell us that we need to have a long-term view. So it's not just today and tomorrow. We have to look way into the future as to what we want for these children that we have been gifted with. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for listening in. As usual, we want to thank today's guest, Sania Dookie of Dookie'sInstitute.ca, Xavier Anderson for providing music. Until next time, I'm your host, Yolanda Jack, reminding you, he who watches the wind will not sow. He who watches the clouds will not reap. Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 4. You were born for greatness. Step out into your greatness so that mankind can benefit from you being here. So long, until next time.
Imagine you move from a place where you lived all your life. Imagine you move and you leave all your children and wife. Starting all over again, but no one you know is around. Well, they didn't have to imagine. They built it up from the ground. How does it sound? Not easy because it isn't. Could have praised them, but it didn't. But the red bond, that's a winner. And they ran straight to the finish. You get to know them up close and personal. Wait, just give me a minute. Welcome to the front row. Can I get a drum roll? Intentional.